My name is Edward Whitmore. I'm 68 years old, and one night my grandson looked me in the eye and whispered, "Grandpa, I learned something awful about Mom and Dad." He told me they were plotting to have me declared incompetent, to take my money, and to throw me out of my own home. Imagine hearing that. Your own son and his wife, laughing about erasing you while you're still alive. That was the moment I knew everything had changed. Stay with me, because this story is about betrayal, dignity, and the revenge that followed. And before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe and like this video. I'll never forget the night they tried to erase me from my own home. It was a Sunday dinner, the kind I used to dream of when I was a younger man. I had always imagined my children gathered around my table, laughter in the air, the smell of roast chicken filling the room. But reality is a cruel thief. That evening, I sat at the head of the table in silence, listening to the sharp laughter of my daughter-in-law Monica and the shallow jokes of my son, Daniel. My chair, the one my late wife insisted was mine, had been pushed slightly back, as if I didn't belong at the center anymore. They gave Monica's father my place of honor, and when I quietly pulled the chair back toward me, Monica smirked, as if I were some senile old man making a scene. "Dad, don't start," Daniel muttered under his breath, his eyes warning me to stay quiet. I stayed silent. I swallowed the humiliation. I told myself it was nothing. But my grandson Jacob's eyes caught mine from across the table, and in them I saw something he shouldn't have had to carry at 12 years old. Shame on my behalf. When dinner was over, Monica announced in her sing-song voice, "We've been talking, Edward, and we think it's time you move into something more manageable. A smaller place, or perhaps an assisted living facility, where people can take proper care of you." Her words cut deeper than any knife. "This is my home," I said firmly. My voice didn't tremble, though my heart thundered in my chest. Monica tilted her head, feigning pity. "Of course, but you can't keep up with it anymore. And Daniel and I have already looked into options. It's really for your own good." My own son nodded along. "It's what Mom would have wanted, Dad. You need to think about the future." The future. I had spent my entire life building theirs, working overtime shifts, cashing out my retirement early so Daniel could start his business, paying off Lisa's college loans when her husband couldn't. And now, they sat in my living room, in the house I paid for, with every aching bone in my body, telling me I was no longer fit to live in it. I stared at Daniel, and for the first time, I saw not my boy, but a man hardened by greed, softened by his wife's manipulations. Monica wasn't suggesting, she was declaring. She had her claws in every word he spoke, every glance he gave. Before I could respond, Jacob shuffled into the hallway, eyes wide and frightened. He waited until the adults had left the room, then tugged at my sleeve. His voice was barely a whisper. "Grandpa, I learned something awful about Mom and Dad." I bent down, my heart already breaking at the sight of his trembling hands. "They said, they're gonna tell people you're not right in the head, that you're crazy. They want to take your money and put you away." His lip quivered, his little fists tightening. "Grandpa." They laughed about it. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. The roast dinner in my stomach turned to ash. My son, my flesh and blood, plotting with his wife to strip me of dignity, of freedom, of everything I had built. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The humiliation hardened into resolve. The father who once sacrificed silently for his children gave way to the man who would not, under any circumstance, be erased. I stood up, walked to the phone on the wall, and dialed 3 numbers with steady fingers. 911. The operator's voice came calm and rehearsed. "Emergency services. What's your emergency?" I didn't answer immediately. My eyes locked on Daniel and Monica in the other room, laughing, sipping wine from the crystal glasses I had given them on their wedding day, the glasses my wife had once polished with care. My voice was low, but it carried decades of betrayal, grief, and anger. "Yes," I said, "I need to report something." It was the first move in a game they never saw coming. The truth is, I wasn't always this man. I wasn't always filled with bitterness, watching my own blood treat me like a burden. No. Once upon a time, I believed in family above all else. I believed that sacrifice meant loyalty, that love meant safety. I gave them everything. My sweat, my years, my youth, my savings. I believed if I worked hard enough, loved hard enough, then when my time came to grow old, my children would lift me the way I had carried them. I was wrong. The story of how we came to that night, of how my children and their spouses turned their backs on me, didn't happen overnight. Betrayal is never sudden. It starts small, like a crack in a dam, until one day the flood bursts, and everything you've built comes crashing down. And so, if you will listen, I'll tell you how it all began. But I warn you, it is not a happy story. It is a story of how love curdled into entitlement, how kindness was mistaken for weakness, and how a father became a pawn in the very family he once lived and bled for. And it is the story of how that same father, broken but not defeated, found a way to turn every betrayal into justice. Because when Jacob whispered those words, "Grandpa," I learned something awful about Mom and Dad. I knew one thing with absolute clarity. They thought I was finished. But they had forgotten who taught them how to fight. I wasn't always an old man with shaky hands and a heart hardened by betrayal. Once, I was just a husband, a father, and later a grandfather who lived for the people sitting around my table. I married young, at 24, to my high school sweetheart, Margaret. She had a smile that could soften the hardest day, and a voice that could calm storms. We built this home together, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. Every corner of this house carries her touch. The wallpaper in the kitchen, faded now, was her idea. The rose bushes out front were her pride. Even the worn oak dining table was chosen because she said one day, "This will hold more stories than we ever could." And she was right. We had 2 children, Daniel, my eldest, and Lisa, my little girl. From the moment they were born, I swore I'd do whatever it took to give them a better life than mine. My father was a hard man. Not cruel, but distant. He believed providing meant working until his hands bled, and little else. I wanted to be different. I wanted to show my children that love wasn't just in what you provided, but how you carried them, how you listened, how you sacrificed, without ever making them feel it was a burden. For years, I worked double shifts at the steel plant. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, even Margaret's doctor visits when she grew ill. Not because I didn't care, but because I believed every hour of sweat was an hour invested into my children's future. Margaret would wait up for me, warm plate in the oven, gentle kiss on my forehead, telling me I was building something bigger than myself. And when she passed, far too young, I doubled down on my promise. Daniel was in his 20s by then, struggling with failed business ideas, while Lisa was finishing college. I poured every dollar I had into keeping them afloat. When Daniel came to me, hat in hand, saying he needed money to finally make it, I dipped into my retirement fund without hesitation. When Lisa married a man who couldn't hold a steady job, I helped her cover her loans and even the down payment on their first house. Every sacrifice felt worth it. I told myself, they'll take care of me when I'm old. They'll remember what I gave them. But children grow in ways you don't expect. Lisa, sweet at first, became distant once her debts were cleared. Calls came less often. Visits grew shorter. Her husband always found a way to remind me how much help I'd given them, as if I were a burden even in my generosity. Still, I let it slide. Daniel, he was different. He stayed close, but not out of love. Looking back now, I see it for what it was: convenience. He and his wife, Monica, moved into town not long after Margaret's passing. She was polite at first, always smiling, always offering help with groceries or paperwork. But her help came with strings, subtle at first, thicker as the years passed. She began making little comments at family dinners. "Edward, maybe you should let us handle the finances. These bills can be confusing at your age. Dad, don't strain yourself fixing that fence. You'll end up in the hospital again. And then what?" At first, I brushed them off as concern. But they weren't concern. They were rehearsed lines, practiced seeds planted in my son's ear. Daniel echoed her, almost word for word. "Dad, you should stop driving. It's not safe. Dad, you can't keep up with this house. Think about downsizing." I wasn't blind. I saw the way Monica looked at my house, at the framed photographs, at the land surrounding it. This wasn't care. This was calculation. One summer evening, I overheard them in the kitchen while they thought I was asleep. Monica's voice, sharp and cold. "If we get him into assisted living, the house is ours. Do you realize how much this property is worth now? We could finally move into something bigger. Sell this place. Split the profit." Daniel's voice, hesitant but weak. "He's not ready yet." "Not ready," she snapped. "He's old. He'll believe whatever we tell him. You want to keep struggling? Or do you want to finally give me the life I deserve?" I remember lying in bed, my chest heavy, staring at the ceiling. That was the first time I understood the shape of her ambition. My son, my boy, who once held my hand at the park, who cried when Margaret died, was no longer his own man. He was an echo of his wife's hunger. After that, small humiliations piled up. At Jacob's birthday party, they sat me at the far end of the table, away from the children. Monica laughed when I asked why. "So you can rest, Edward. It's too noisy for you near the kids." When I tried to bring Jacob a gift, she told me it was too much, and quietly handed it back later, as if my love for my grandson was inappropriate. Even Daniel began treating me differently. Once, when I insisted I could still mow my own lawn, he chuckled. "Dad, don't embarrass yourself. The neighbors will think we're neglecting you." Neglecting me. It was like they'd rewritten the story of my life, turning me from a father who sacrificed everything into a fragile old man they had to manage. And yet, Jacob, sweet boy Jacob, never looked at me that way. He would sneak into my room with his school projects, ask me for advice, tell me his secrets. Once, he whispered, "Grandpa, you're the only one who really listens." Those words broke me and healed me at the same time. But children see more than we think. They hear more than they should. And Jacob began hearing the whispers behind closed doors. He began piecing together the plan that Monica and Daniel thought they could hide. I noticed the change in him before he said a word. His smile grew thinner, his questions more hesitant. Once, while helping me in the garden, he asked, "Grandpa, if someone wanted to take something from you, could they?" I looked at him, startled, and he quickly shook his head. "Never mind." That was the moment I knew. Something wasn't right. The betrayal didn't come as a single blow. It came as a carefully staged performance, one they orchestrated with precision, and with no regard for the man who had built the very stage they stood on. It began on a Tuesday morning when I received a letter with the county court's seal stamped across the top. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words blurred at first, but then I saw them clearly. Petition for guardianship. Daniel and Monica had filed, claiming I was no longer capable of handling my own affairs, that I was forgetful, erratic, susceptible to manipulation. My own son, swearing under oath that I was incompetent. Attached were false statements, neighbors claiming I had wandered the streets at night, medical notes doctored to suggest dementia. None of it true, none of it mine. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning sun cutting across the wood, and stared at the papers. My chest ached, as if Margaret's absence had returned in full force. For decades, I had sacrificed, protected, and built for them. And here they were, dragging my name into court to strip me of the right to live as myself. The hearing was set for Friday. When I arrived at the courthouse, wearing my best suit, the same one I wore to Margaret's funeral, I found the pews filled with familiar faces, neighbors, distant cousins, even members of my church congregation. Monica had made sure of it. She wanted an audience. She wanted my fall to be public, undeniable, final. As I walked down the aisle, I caught whispers. "He's not well, poor man." "Did you hear? Daniel's taking care of him now. They say he forgets where he is." Every word felt like a stone thrown against my chest. At the front sat Daniel and Monica, polished and poised. She wore a somber black dress, as if she were attending my funeral. He avoided my eyes, staring straight ahead like a boy caught in a lie, but too afraid to turn back. Beside them sat a lawyer, slick hair, sharp tie, a folder thick with so-called evidence. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Monica wasted no time. She leaned into her performance, voice quivering just enough to sound sincere. "Your Honor, we're deeply concerned for my father-in-law. He leaves the stove on. He misplaces his pills. He forgets simple things. We love him dearly, but he's not safe alone." Lies, polished into pity. Daniel nodded, his voice low, practiced. "Dad's not the same man. He gets confused. He called me last week, swearing Mom was still alive." The courtroom gasped. My heart lurched. I had never made that call. But the lie landed, heavy and convincing. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly, gripping the wooden stand. My voice carried decades of labor, loss, and sacrifice. "I am not incompetent," I said. "I pay my bills. I cook my meals. I read the paper every morning. I built that house with my own hands, and I have lived there for 40 years. I am not confused. I am not lost. What I am is betrayed." A murmur rippled through the room, but Monica leaned forward, crocodile tears glistening. "See?" she whispered loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "The paranoia, the anger. It's worse than we thought." The judge tapped his gavel for silence. Evidence was presented. Bank withdrawals they claimed I didn't remember. I had made them myself. Medical notes signed by a doctor I'd never met. Statements from neighbors I once trusted. And then came the final blow. The judge ruled in their favor. Temporary guardianship granted to Daniel, pending further review. My accounts frozen, my decisions suspended. My own son holding legal control over me. The room shifted, as if the air had been sucked out. I felt small, diminished, like a man standing naked in a crowd. Afterward, in the hallway, people avoided my eyes. Only Jacob rushed to my side, his small hand slipping into mine. "Grandpa," he whispered, his eyes burning. "I know the truth. I know you're not crazy." Those words saved me from collapsing entirely. But the humiliation wasn't over. That afternoon, when we returned home, a sheriff's deputy arrived at the door with papers. Monica stood proudly behind him, arms folded, her smile just barely hidden. "Mr. Whitmore," the deputy said, avoiding my eyes, "by order of the court, you are required to vacate the premises until suitable living arrangements can be made." Vacate. My house. My sanctuary. The walls where Margaret's laughter still lived. The garden where Jacob and I planted tomatoes each spring. The bedroom where I held her hand as she left this world. Neighbors gathered outside, pretending not to stare. One woman clutched her purse tighter as if I were suddenly a dangerous man. Another whispered into her phone. I felt their eyes burn into me as the deputy handed me a slip of paper. Eviction. Dressed in legality. Daniel's voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "Dad, it's just temporary. We'll get you settled somewhere safe." Safe. The word dripped with poison. I turned to Monica. Her smile was thin, satisfied. "It's really for the best, Edward. You'll thank us one day." "Thank them." I gathered what little dignity I had left and stepped outside, my suitcase in hand, Jacob clinging to my arm. The air was heavy, the silence cruel. I didn't speak. Not a word. As I walked down the steps of the home I had built, past the faces of neighbors who once respected me, I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had ever made pressing down on my shoulders. For a moment, I believed they had won, that I was finished. But deep inside, beneath the grief, beneath the humiliation, something else stirred. A quiet ember, small but unyielding. I did not let it show. I kept my face calm, my voice silent, my steps steady. But as I walked away from the life they had stolen, I made a vow no one heard, not even Jacob. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought wrong. The first nights away from my home were the hardest. I slept on a thin mattress in a small rented room above a hardware store, the kind of place where footsteps echoed through the walls and the air smelled faintly of dust. Each morning I woke to silence, no roses blooming outside the window, no photographs of Margaret smiling from the mantel. But silence is where plans are born. I didn't storm or rage. I didn't confront Daniel or Monica with accusation. I let them believe I was broken, compliant, finished. What they didn't know was that I still had something they hadn't accounted for: patience. My first strike wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a signature. You see, long before Margaret passed, she and I had updated our wills and tied certain parts of our estate into trust. Quiet, simple documents that most of the family forgot existed. I still had copies locked in a safety deposit box. Among them was one particular clause: no sale or transfer of the house could be finalized without my signed approval, regardless of guardianship status. A small detail, but one Monica had overlooked. The following week, I visited the bank. The clerk looked at me with the pitying eyes I had grown used to. "Mr. Whitmore, are you sure you want to make these adjustments? Your son is listed as guardian now." I smiled, soft but steady. "I may be old, but I still know how to write my name. That's all that matters." I signed a notice freezing the property under review, citing previous contractual restrictions. It was bureaucratic language, the kind that moves like molasses through the system, but effective. No matter what Monica tried, no realtor could touch the house until the matter was resolved. That was my first quiet victory. 2 weeks later, I learned that Daniel and Monica had arranged a meeting with a real estate agent, eager to put my home on the market. I attended, uninvited, walking into my own living room as though I still belonged there. The agent, a young man in a fitted suit, greeted me with a confused smile. "Mr. Whitmore? I didn't know you'd be here." Daniel's face flushed. "Dad, this isn't the time." But before he could finish, I handed the agent the freeze notice. His smile faltered. I can't proceed with this, not until this is cleared." Monica's jaw clenched, her painted smile twitching. "This is a mistake. He doesn't know what he's doing." The agent adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable. "With all due respect, ma'am, the law is the law. Until this is resolved, nothing can move forward." I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned to Monica and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "You should have read the fine print." For the first time, I saw her mask crack. Just for a moment, a flicker of panic crossed her eyes. That was only the beginning. My second move came through the finances. With guardianship, Daniel had access to my accounts, or so he thought. What he didn't realize was that for years I had kept a separate account in Margaret's name, quietly maintained even after her passing, with Jacob listed as beneficiary. It wasn't much, but it was enough to matter, enough to fund a plan. I withdrew a modest sum, small enough to go unnoticed, but enough to hire a lawyer. Not one of the glossy, big city men Monica favored, but an old friend, Frank Donnelly, who had known me since the steel plant days. Frank owed me more than one favor, and when I explained my situation, his eyes narrowed with quiet fury. "They think they can bury you alive, Edward," he said. "Let them try. We'll bury them in paper first." Frank filed motions, subtle ones, requests for independent evaluations, demands for proof of medical claims, inquiries into the so-called neighbors' statements. Each one slowed their march, tripped them up, forced them to spend money on legal fees they hadn't anticipated. I knew Monica hated delays. She wanted the house fast, the money faster. Each obstacle made her sharper, edgier. I watched her temper flare in small ways, snapping at Daniel in public, rolling her eyes when Jacob asked innocent questions, sighing loudly when I so much as entered the room. And that was the third strike, because Jacob noticed. Children are mirrors. They see what adults try to hide. One evening, he slipped me a note folded into his math homework. "Grandpa, Mom's angry all the time now. Dad's tired. They fight about you every night." I held that note in my hand like a weapon. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was proof that my quiet resistance was working. I was planting cracks in their perfect facade. The final seed came almost by accident. During one of the supervised check-ins at my house, I noticed Monica leave her phone unlocked on the counter. A message flashed across the screen from her sister. "Did you tell Daniel about the loan? Don't let him find out." I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. That one glimpse told me everything. Monica wasn't just scheming against me. She was hiding things from my son, too. The knowledge settled into me like a stone at the bottom of a pond. Heavy, certain, useful. The first arc of my revenge wasn't about winning back everything. It was about showing them that I wasn't powerless. That the old man they thought they could dismiss still knew how to fight quietly, precisely, patiently. The house was frozen. The finances were tangled. The marriage between Daniel and Monica was strained. And I, the man they declared incompetent, had become the one variable they couldn't control. I didn't announce it. I didn't gloat. I let them stew, let them feel the first taste of doubt. But inside, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not anger, not despair, control. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt steady again. And as I walked out of that courtroom for the second time, this time with Monica scowling and Daniel silent, I felt the shift in the air. The game had turned. If my first strikes rattled Monica, her counterattack came swift and brutal. A month after Frank filed our motions, I received another notice. This time, it wasn't about guardianship. It was about capacity. Monica had petitioned for a full psychological evaluation, claiming I posed a risk to myself and others. If granted, it would strip me of any right to contest their control. They weren't just trying to take the house now. They wanted to erase me entirely. At the hearing, Monica put on her best performance yet. "Your Honor," she said, dabbing at her eye, "we found Dad wandering outside at midnight, confused about where he lived. He talks to Margaret as if she's still alive. We love him, but he's not safe." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Heads shook with pity. Daniel sat stiff beside her, avoiding my gaze, a puppet repeating the lines he had been fed. I wanted to shout, to tear down their lies, but Frank had warned me. "Let them overplay their hand, Edward. Lies unravel faster when they're stretched too thin." So I stayed calm. When the judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation, Monica smirked, as though she had already won. She didn't know that Frank and I had anticipated the flashback. Months before, after Jacob first whispered his warning, I had begun keeping notes. Small details, every day, written in a leather journal Margaret had once given me for our anniversary. The entries weren't just about my routines. They were meticulous records. When I woke, when I ate, the bills I paid, the books I read, even crossword puzzles completed in ink. Each page bore the date and time, a steady rhythm of order and clarity. Frank insisted I also visit my own doctor, one I trusted, not the one Monica conveniently recommended. Quietly, discreetly, I underwent a full evaluation months earlier, passing every test. The results were filed, sealed, waiting for the day I'd need them. And that day had come. At the psychiatric evaluation, The appointed doctor, a man in his 40s with a clipboard and cool smile, asked me question after question. Dates, names, historical events. He tried subtle traps. "What year is it, Mr. Whitmore? Who's the president?" I answered each one with calm precision. I even quoted a passage from a book I'd just finished, something his interns had likely never read. At the end, he frowned slightly, as though disappointed he had found nothing to confirm Monica's story. Weeks later, when the report came back declaring me fully competent, Monica's face turned pale in the courtroom. Her lies had snapped under the weight of evidence she hadn't expected. But that wasn't the twist. That was just defense. The real twist came from something she never knew existed. One evening, after another tense court session, I received an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a small USB drive with a note. "Thought you should hear this. A friend." Puzzled, I plugged it into my old laptop. Static crackled. Then voices. Daniel's voice, low and uneasy. "Monica, this has gone too far. He's my father. We can't just put him away." Monica's sharper, colder. "Don't be weak. Once the house sells, we'll be free. Do you want to keep living paycheck to paycheck? Because I don't. He's old, Daniel. He'll be gone soon anyway. We're just speeding it up." I sat frozen, my blood like ice. The recording was clear, damning, and time-stamped only days earlier. Whoever had captured it, a neighbor, maybe, or one of Daniel's guilty friends, had handed me a weapon more powerful than any lawyer's brief. When the next hearing began, Monica strutted in with her usual air of superiority. She presented new witnesses, even a forged medical bill suggesting I had unpaid debts. She spoke with the confidence of someone who believed victory was inevitable. Then Frank stood. His voice was steady, deliberate. "Your Honor, before we proceed, we'd like to submit new evidence." He clicked a button, and the recording filled the courtroom. Monica's voice rang out, venomous and undeniable. "Once the house sells, we'll be free. Do you want to keep living paycheck to paycheck?" Gasp. Murmurs. The judge's eyebrows arched. Daniel's face turned white, sweat beading on his forehead. Monica shot up from her chair. "This is taken out of context. That could be anyone." But the judge silenced her with a raised hand. "The voices are clear, and if necessary, they can be verified by experts. Sit down, Mrs. Whitmore." For the first time, the courtroom wasn't looking at me with pity. They were looking at them with disgust. Monica's mask cracked entirely. She hissed something into Daniel's ear, but he didn't respond. His eyes were on me, wide, lost. A boy staring at the father he had betrayed, realizing he had chosen the wrong side. That night, as I walked out of the courthouse, I didn't celebrate. There was no gloating, no laughter, but inside I felt a shift. For months I had been on the defensive, shielding myself from their blows. Now the tide had turned. The whispers in the neighborhood had changed. Where once they said, "Poor Edward, he's not well," now they muttered, "Did you hear what Monica said? How could she?" Reputation is a fragile thing. Monica prided herself on appearances, the perfect daughter-in-law, the devoted caretaker. That recording had shattered her image, but I knew she wouldn't stop. People like Monica never stop. She would fight harder, dig deeper, strike crueler, and I was ready. I went home to my rented room, sat by the window overlooking the quiet street, and opened Margaret's old journal. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote, "They think they've cornered me. They think I'm playing defense, but the truth is, the game has only just begun." I closed the book and stared at the night sky, the moon casting pale light through the glass. My reflection stared back at me. Older, yes. Worn down, yes, but no longer. Somewhere across town, I imagined Monica pacing, fuming, searching for a way to recover what she had lost. And in that moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Because she had yet to realize that I had more than one card left to play. And when I did, it would end everything. Monica never knew how to hide her victory. For weeks, As the guardianship battle dragged on, she strutted through town like a queen who had already seized her crown. At church, she made sure everyone heard how hard it was caring for me. At the grocery store, she sighed to anyone within earshot. It's so stressful. Managing an old man's affairs, she loved the whispers of sympathy, the clucks of pity, the sideways glances that told her she'd won. Daniel followed her shadow, silent and weary, his face a mix of guilt and resignation. I barely recognized him anymore. My boy, buried under her ambition. But appearances have a way of unraveling, especially when the ground beneath them has already been cut away. The final hearing came on a rainy Friday morning. The courthouse was crowded. Neighbors, extended family, even members of my church congregation sat waiting. Monica had invited them all, of course. This was to be her triumph, the day she officially cemented control over my estate and my home. She sat tall in her chair, Daniel beside her, their lawyer flipping through a stack of papers thick with forged evidence. Every so often, Monica glanced at me and smiled. A thin, victorious curve of the lips, like a cat watching a cornered mouse. The judge called the room to order. Monica's lawyer rose, voice slick as oil. Your Honor, my clients have demonstrated through multiple testimonies, medical records, and behavioral evidence that Mr. Whitmore is no longer capable of responsibly managing his affairs. We ask that guardianship be made permanent and full transfer of his estate be allowed. A murmur of agreement rolled through the crowd. Some shook their heads in pity. Others nodded solemnly, as if already convinced. Then Monica stood. She always liked a stage. Your Honor, she began, her voice quivering just enough to seem sincere. This has been so hard on us. We've only wanted what's best for my father-in-law. He doesn't always remember things. He gets angry. He can't manage alone. We love him, but love also means making the hard choices. She turned, meeting the eyes of the crowd, making sure each one saw her as the dutiful daughter-in-law, the selfless caretaker. Then she looked straight at me, her smile widening. Dad, she said sweetly, we're doing this for you. The room fell quiet, the silence thick with pity. For me, the supposed broken man, and for her, the poor woman burdened with his care. It was the perfect moment for her. The gloating, the victory, the final nail. And that's when I stood. Frank rose with me, placing a folder on the judge's desk. Your Honor, before you rule, we'd like to present final evidence. Independent audits, property records, and witness testimony. The judge frowned. Proceed. Frank opened the folder, pulling out the first document. This, he said, holding it high, is a certified trust document, executed years ago by Mr. Whitmore and his late wife. It stipulates that under no circumstances can the family home be sold, transferred, or claimed without Mr. Whitmore's active written approval. Guardianship has no power here. Gasps rippled through the room. Monica's face tightened, but she quickly forced another smile. That's irrelevant, she snapped. We were never going to sell without his consent. Frank smirked. Then why did you schedule 3 separate realtor appointments in the past month? A hush fell. The realtor himself, subpoenaed by Frank, stepped forward. They told me the property would be available immediately. Mrs. Whitmore said the old man wouldn't be an issue. The courtroom buzzed. Monica's cheeks flushed crimson. Daniel shifted in his seat. But Frank wasn't done. He lifted the next paper. Here are financial audits, showing multiple transfers from Mr. Whitmore's accounts. Unauthorized, forged signatures, all coinciding with times Mrs. Whitmore had access. The judge's brows knit together. Are you suggesting theft? Frank nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And if that weren't enough, he clicked a small device on the desk. The recording played again. Monica's voice, sharp and venomous. Once the house sells, we'll be free. He's old. He'll be gone soon anyway. The crowd erupted. Whispers, gasps. A few even shouted. Shameful! Someone cried. The judge banged the gavel. Order! Order! Monica leapt to her feet, her mask gone, fury in her voice. "This is a setup. That recording is fake. He's manipulating all of you." And that's when I spoke. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. My voice was steady, quiet, but it carried across the room like iron. For 68 years, I worked for everything I gave this family. I built a home. I paid debts. I sacrificed my retirement, my youth, my health. Not once did I ask for thanks. Not once did I ask for repayment. All I ever wanted was loyalty, respect, love. I turned to Monica, my eyes locking on hers. "And what did you give me, Monica?" "Lies, papers, humiliation. You tried to erase me while I was still breathing." She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "No, you've spoken enough. Now you'll listen." The room was silent. Even the judge leaned back, watching. "You thought I was weak. You thought age made me blind, that grief made me foolish. But you forgot one thing. I taught this family how to fight. And I fight with truth, not lies." I stepped closer, every eye following me. "You wanted my house. It's locked in trust. You wanted my money. It's gone. Moved into Jacob's name months ago. You wanted to shame me? Look around." I gestured to the murmuring crowd, their eyes filled not with pity for me, but with disgust for her. "They see you now. They hear you now, and there is no coming back from this." Monica trembled, her lips twitching, eyes darting wildly. Daniel sat frozen, head bowed, unable to look at me. I leaned closer, my voice dropping low. A final blade delivered calm and certain. "You thought you'd bury me, Monica, but all you've done is dig your own grave." The room was still, silent. Then, slowly, applause began. A few claps at first, then a wave of approval from the back rows, until the entire courtroom roared with it. The judge slammed the gavel for order, but even he couldn't suppress the smirk tugging at his lips. "I have heard enough. Petition denied. Guardianship revoked. This court will refer evidence of fraud and theft to the district attorney's office for prosecution." It was over. As the gavel struck, Monica collapsed back into her chair, her victory shattered, her reputation in ruins. Daniel buried his face in his hands, the weight of his choices crashing down at last. I stood tall, not triumphant, not gloating, but steady. For months they had paraded me as weak, broken, finished. And now, in front of everyone, the truth stood undeniable. I was still here, stronger than they ever imagined. Jacob rushed into my arms, his small voice breaking through the din. "I knew you'd win, Grandpa. I knew it." I held him close, my heart swelling with something I hadn't felt in years. Not just relief, but dignity restored. And as Monica was led out, screaming about conspiracies and lies, I didn't follow. I didn't need to. My revenge was complete, and it hadn't been with fists or fury. It had been with patience, with truth, with the steady hand of a father who refused to be erased. And in the silence that followed, I whispered to myself, barely audible, but enough. "Margaret, we did it." The aftermath came quickly. The district attorney's office picked up the case within weeks, pulling apart Monica's forged documents and tracing every suspicious transfer she had engineered. The evidence was overwhelming. Neighbors who had once testified against me admitted, under oath, that Monica had pressured them. Even Daniel, finally worn down by the weight of his lies, confessed to signing papers he hadn't understood. Papers Monica had pushed across the table with that same cold smile she always wore. In the end, Monica faced charges of fraud and elder abuse. Daniel avoided prison, but not disgrace. His name was dragged through the papers, his business associates pulled away, his friends disappeared. They hadn't just lost my house, my money, or my trust. They had lost their reputations, their standing, the very thing they had tried to build on my back. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. Revenge wasn't in watching her handcuffed or him humiliated. It had already been done, publicly, the day they stood in court and heard their own voices betray them. That was enough. Instead, I spent that morning in the garden, my hands in the soil, the sun warm on my shoulders. Jacob sat beside me, carefully pressing seeds into the dirt. "Will these grow, Grandpa?" he asked. "They always do," I said, patting the earth gently. "It just takes patience." He smiled, though I could see the weight in his young eyes, the things he'd seen, the truths he'd carried far too early. I wished I could erase that. But maybe it wasn't all bad. Maybe it taught him something important, that lies collapse, and dignity, though bruised, can be restored. Life after the storm was quieter. I returned to my house, and though it bore the scars of their attempts to claim it, it was still mine. The rose bushes Margaret planted bloomed as if they'd been waiting for me. The dining table, scratched and weathered, still held the weight of family history. Though fewer chairs were filled now, Lisa came back, in time. She stood in the doorway one afternoon, tears in her eyes, guilt heavy in her voice. "Dad, I should have been here. I should have seen what they were doing." I didn't scold her. I didn't remind her of her absence. I simply opened my arms. Family is flawed, broken, stitched together in strange ways. She wasn't part of their betrayal, and that was enough. Still, it was Jacob who filled the empty spaces. He visited often, his laughter chasing away the shadows. He would sit on the porch with me, asking questions no 12-year-old should have to ask. "Grandpa, why did Mom do it? Why did Dad let her?" I never lied to him. Because sometimes, Jacob, people lose themselves. They let greed or fear or pride blind them. And when that happens, they forget the people who loved them first. He thought about it, his small hands folded in his lap. "But you didn't forget me." "No," I said softly, "and I never will." As weeks turned to months, I found peace in the simple things. The morning paper, the smell of coffee, the sound of birds in the garden. The knowledge that I had fought back, not with fists or fury, but with patience and truth. Sometimes, late at night, I sat in Margaret's old chair by the window, the one that still creaked in the same spot. I would close my eyes and imagine her there, listening, nodding, proud. They thought they could erase me. I whispered once, "But you were right, love. Love is stronger when it's steady, and justice always finds its way." In the end, the moral wasn't complicated. It wasn't about wealth or property or even revenge. It was about respect. Aging is not weakness. Growing old is not failure. It is the proof of survival, of sacrifice, of love given again and again. And those who mock it, who prey upon it, who twist it for their own gain, they will find that time has a way of turning on them. Karma, justice, truth, call it what you will, but I've lived long enough to know one thing for certain. You cannot bury a man who built his life on sacrifice. You can wound him. You can betray him. You can even strip him of everything he owns. But if he still has his dignity, his patience, and one person who believes in him, he will rise again. And when he does, the ones who tried to erase him will find themselves erased instead. So now I sit in my garden, Jacob by my side, the roses blooming in the evening light. I don't need applause. I don't need revenge in headlines. I only need the quiet knowledge that I endured, that I fought, and that I won. One day, when Jacob is older, he'll tell this story to his children, not as a tale of bitterness, but as a warning and a reminder. Respect is not optional. Love is not a weakness. And those who betray family for greed always pay the price. I lean back, close my eyes, and let the sun warm my face. The war is over, and I am at peace. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts, or even your own experiences, down in the comments. Your words matter, and they help build this community of people who understand the power of family, respect, and justice. And if you found value in this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Until next time, take care and never forget the strength that lives within you.